I'm Alex Hirsch. Grunkle Stan's screaming voice is kind of my normal voice.
I'm Mike Rianda. I was the creative director on this series and co-wrote this episode with Alex.
So this episode has an interesting origin. This episode came from animation is very production heavy. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of work and a lot of backgrounds and a lot of art. And we were a little behind in production, as we always were. And our producer had a really great suggestion, which was, can you come up with an episode that has less backgrounds?
Yeah.
Maybe we could do a bottle episode, an episode where really hardly anything happens. It takes place in the same location.
Yeah.
And I had a really ambitious thought was, what if Dipper, Mabel, Stan fall into a bottomless pit and it's black for the entire episode?
Yeah.
And we just, through the brilliance of our writing, are able to make it compelling that they're just falling for 21 minutes.
Yeah.
And we'll save backgrounds. Turned out, definitely not a smart enough writer to pull that off. Couldn't think of a plot. And we thought, then maybe let's just have 3 short stories, which ended up having 3 times as many backgrounds.
Especially one that takes place in a gigantic pinball machine that's gorgeous.
Yeah. So what started as a well-mannered idea to come up with an episode that would be easier to produce ended up in an insanely difficult to produce episode. Good intentions resulting in complete chaos.
Yeah. And this also another reason why we came up with this episode is like a three stories in one was we had this episode called Twinstitute because it seems like since Dipper and Mabel are twins and since we kind of knew down the line we'd be hinting at this like larger twin thing with Stan and Ford that we were like, oh, okay, we're gonna and there's the Shining twins are funny.
There's a lot of tropes about spooky twins.
Yeah.
Twins in media tend to be kind of creepy, and it seems like, we could do a whole episode about that.
Yeah.
And that episode almost killed us.
You super can't do a whole episode about that. I mean, maybe you could, and we just never figured it out.
We did many drafts of an episode about Dipper and Mabel going to an institute with all these other pairs of twins and learning about what made them special, and it never came together.
Yeah, and it was a lot of Alex being like, we are the 2 dream twins.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, these kind of children of the corn twins. And when we realized it didn't work, we had a hole in our schedule. And me and Mike realized it's easier to write 3 short episodes than 1 long episode.
Totally.
And we had that idea for a Bottomless Pit episode, which is where this came from.
Yeah.
And this is basically just us goofing around.
Yeah.
One of our producers, Rob Renzetti, genius, could not have done the show without him. He's brilliant.
Love you, Rob.
Bobby
Renzabi.
He was sort of he was the one with actual experience on the show.
Yeah.
Kind of, the adult in the room while me and Mike were goofing off. And he said, when I proposed this idea, that you cannot make this episode. He said, this is essentially this is just sort of a goof off, almost clip show style episode.
Yeah.
And this is something that a series would do in season 3 or 4. He's like, you haven't earned the right to just do a dumb episode about nothing yet.
Yeah, he's like, you haven't earned the right to really pat yourselves on the back and really hey, let's get experimental with the form.
But we were just like, we need an episode due tomorrow. We're writing this. So me and Mike just split up. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I took this first story.
Yeah, we kind of split up the middle one, and then I took the last one, I think. Yeah,
I think you did the first pass on the last one.
Yeah,
yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. It's always super collaborative. Alex taking the final pass at all the scripts and stuff, but generating a ton of content and just reading it to each other, trying to make each other laugh, staying up till 3 a.m. I remember this episode in particular where with Dipper's voice, we could not crack what the 3rd story was going to be. And it was literally 4:15 in the morning, and the script is due the next day, and the whole script was due, the whole 7-minute script, and we were just miserable. And it was maybe Dipper, maybe there's something about, oh God, I'm so tired. Planes, and then I was like, oh, what if Dipper has a voice, and then I was falling asleep as I was saying it, and Alex was like, that could be funny. Let's both split up and write it. And then I started writing and then fell asleep at my computer. And then Alex came up with the episode, and I was like, this is great, man. Let's just use this.
Yeah, right, when you woke up, I had written it.
And I felt so guilty, even though it was 5 a.m. I'm like, Alex, I failed you. I fell asleep at 4:15.
This idea for this one basically came from There was a podcast that Justin Roiland,
Yeah.
the creator of Rick and Morty, friend of mine, voice of Blendon, that he used to do, that every episode was announced by this bizarre deep voice announcer, Smith Harrison, who has the funniest voice I'd ever heard.
He's amazing.
He doesn't sound real. He sounds like Tony the Tiger came to life. And I'd always been looking for an excuse to work with him because his voice was so funny and weird. And the reason we ended up casting Jason Ritter for Dipper, aside from the fact that he's great, is that out of all the auditions, he had a natural voice crack.
Yeah.
Like the he has a natural voice crack, and I've talked to him, and apparently he had that his entire life. When Dipper, like a lot of people, they got a young voice, and then they go through puberty, it's squeaky, and then they grow up. His puberty never ended for Jason.
Yeah.
And that we always were looking for natural takes with a voice crack in them.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it'd be kind of funny to make fun of Jason.
And well, I like that everyone who heard the voice Jason immediately starts beating him with the broom because he's so horrified.
That prank call is something we wrote many times.
Yeah.
Now you sound like some kind of weird commercial dude.
I'll find Stan. He'll like my new voice. You'll see. I'll be right back after these messages. I mean, goodbye. Grunkle Stan. Grunkle Stan! Where are you, Grunkle Stan?
Huh? I know that voice anywhere. You're the guy who prank called me earlier.
No, I'm not. I'm just a 12-year-old boy.
This joke right here is over the shoulder is a camera term for when you place the camera right behind somebody. So his tattoo says over the shoulder, over his shoulder.
Yeah, I think that was an Eric Fountain bit, or at least it was an Eric Fountain bit that he would have head and chin written on his face.
That was Eric Fountain, our board artist, added head and chin, and then I think I added in the storyboard the over the shoulder on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Him shouting escape as he runs in is genuinely funny to me. It's so stupid. That's why I live at the dump. That was I was enjoying. McGucket is a character that it's very easy for me to write at 5 a.m.
Yeah. Well,
The more tired you are, the easier it is to write McGucket.
Well, because there's a spectrum. I remember thinking about this in the beginning of the show. There's a spectrum, like, the further away you get from the main characters, the broader you can get. Because it's
That's
like
right.
you can't really write Mabel incredibly broad because she's a real person with real feelings and there's stories about her. But McGucket can live in the dump and, be kind of a monster. And eventually when we gave him, a little bit more of a story, it was harder to write those jokes as much. You know?
100%.
You ready for your new voice?
This is for those of you who are aspiring writers or writers listening, it's every episode, even a mini 7-minute episode, builds to a choice.
Yeah.
Once you notice it, it might drive you a little crazy because every third act ends with we try to crystallize the choice. So something like Dipper holding up the vial and holding up the recording. Even in a short episode, we have a moment like that. You're not dramatically invested.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like a story until you have a character make a change even late in the story.
Yeah, and even for a 7-minute episode, without a little bit of structure, it just feels like, why are we watching this?
This section was storyboarded by Alonso Ramirez Ramos,
who is a delight of a human being.
One of our champion board artists. He's got 10 Emmys now.
Yeah,
he's
he's got
good.
a bathtub full of Annies and Emmys.
And we were wasting his talent with this.
But and it's sometimes with this stuff you feel sad because the original. The team and Rough Draft did such a great job with this episode, but the original drawings are so appealing.
Puns or whatever?
This story has the least amount of sort of dramatic significance and the most amount of insanely difficult, complex artwork. We got Alonso, as we said, one of our best artists. We got all of our painters doing these amazing backgrounds.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just like a goofy one-off.
Yeah, but it's the art team
really did an amazing
Ian Worrell
job
and Ellie
on this.
Mihalka and Josh Parpan just crushed it. It looks really great, especially once you get in there and you're starting to see that stuff in scale.
I love pinball. I'm kind of obsessed with it. just the idea of, as a kid, it always seemed like a magical place in there. Like I wanted to climb inside.
Yeah.
It seemed like anything could happen. And like I always wanted to do an episode where we went inside a pinball machine, but you often have these ideas that are not big enough.
Yeah.
It's much easier to write. The longer the story gets, the harder it is to write.
Yeah.
And the longer the story it is, the more it needs to have depth, or else you get impatient as an audience.
Yeah.
So even though I always wanted to go inside a pinball machine, I could never think of a character arc for it. In 7 minutes, you can sort of totally enjoy it without it mattering too much.
Yeah. We also missed a joke where Soos's greatest memory was finding a piece of pizza in a VCR. That was Alonzo's joke.
That was our storyboard artist who came up with that. Alonzo, our storyboard artist who did this, he also is always looking for excuses to put the characters in costumes.
Yeah.
He loves dressing up the characters, and it was a lot of fun to see them in these outfits.
Totally.
This is... Oftentimes, we would try to get a celebrity or someone to do a voice, and then wait really long to see if they could do it. And then when they couldn't, I would just have to do it at the last second. So like, I really wanted Sam Elliott to do this cowboy. I really wanted him. He's the cowboy from The Big Lebowski. He's in everything. I desperately wanted him. And casting kept saying like, he's not returning our calls. And I'm like,
you mean he doesn't want to play a sentient pinball skull for 3 minutes in one episode of a kid's show on the Disney Channel?
And I just kept holding out hope. They're like, can we get like someone else? I was like, no, it's got to be Sam Elliott.
Yeah.
And then like the last day, I'm like, yippee-ki-yay, it's me now, partners. I'm doing a bad cowboy voice. Yeehaw, etc.
This and the pinball machine was roughly based on Funhouse, that has a giant ventriloquist dummy in it that mocks you. It's very important to me to point that out.
Not cheating yet.
How are we ever gonna get out of here?
You'll notice they run into a room that says spittoon parlor. That's a meaningless phrase. Originally it said saloon. And we got the note saying you cannot reference a saloon. And I was like, if I can't call it a saloon, can I call it a spittoon parlor? Which they were fine with that.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone ever noticed.
It doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters, but we spent a lot of time on it.
My time has come.
All right, let's go, Soos. Soos? So are you, like, doing anything later, or...?
Soos's level of intelligence was something we were always
Yeah, totally. Well,
trying to figure out.
Because especially, you know, as that thing we were talking about, the closer they are to the main cast of characters, the less broad you can do them. But Soos was kind of variable.
Yeah.
Sometimes you needed to give him depth. Sometimes he could be as crazy as falling in love with a 2D pinball elements. But, you know, he redeems himself here by coming up with this great plan.
The design of the inside of this pinball machine and the painting and like the green. This was painted by one of our painters, Ellie Halka. She did such an amazing job. Oh, that's the cowboy saying "yippee-ki-yay what" is a reference to the show Hey Dude. I don't know if anyone remembers. It was this like Nickelodeon live action show.
Yeah.
And "yippee-ki-yay what" is in the theme song, and it cracked me up to reference that.
Yeah, because sometimes like I said, when we're writing this stuff at 4:15, we're really just trying to make each other laugh to get some sort of semblance of enjoyment out of how hard we're working. That being said, it was an amazing, you know, I'm referencing a lot of things that were like, you know, hard in the show, but it was an amazing experience too. It's
the late nights stick out more than the easy nights.
Yeah, totally.
You'll remember in the earlier episode I was talking about how every story builds to a choice. Here it is. The choice moment has arrived. Soos has to choose between his high score and his friends. Again, you know he's going to choose his friends, but we tried to suggest that Soos has accomplished nothing in his life, and that a high score really means enough to him that he would pause for a moment to sort of give the impression of a dramatic arc to the story.
Well, because especially when, you know, you want those choices to seem legitimate, because sometimes they're false choices, like in this episode, where it's like, you know, he's going to pick his friends, but you really want to build to the point where you hope you have no idea what the character's going to do, and you're trying to guess,
trying to make it dramatic. Yeah. We liked the idea of Stan. We wanted Stan to have a story. We knew there wasn't time, so we really enjoyed the idea that Stan would say the dumbest thing you'd ever heard. We couldn't say Super Bowl. That was copywritten, but Football Bowl was fine. Do you remember where this came from?
I don't remember, but it still cracks me up.
I think this was something I wrote to make you laugh that I planned on cutting, and then no one told us to get rid of it. The fact that like a robot shows up, like that's another one of my voices, Footbot.
I love that he calls him Daddy.
I love you, Stan. And as you guys are hearing right now from Mike's laughter, Mike is the best like writing collaborator I could have hoped for in my life because
That's
like
true.
I could be kind of cynical. I can kind of lose hope. Like Mike, like when Mike laughs, he laughs big, and it makes you feel good, and it gives you the energy to keep writing.
Well, and I'm also typically laughing hysterically as
At your
I'm
own joke,
writing,
yeah.
and like I can always feel like Alex would be in the next office being like, "Ooh, Mike's coming up with something good," and then he would come in the office like, "What are you writing?" And I'm like, "Well, what if this nacho cheese became sentient?" And I'm like laughing so hard that I'm crying, and Alex is just like rubbing his temples like, "We can't use this in the show, Mike. What are you doing?"
I have many memories of working in my office and hearing Mike losing his mind laughing from across the hall. The whole studio's empty, and I'd go in there thinking he had like taken a break to watch a movie, and he's just laughing so hard at his own jokes. This sequence, which I love, I'm very proud of this scene. For some reason, it always makes me laugh.
Yeah.
This actually started as our storyboard
Storyboarding
test.
yeah.
That when we would get storyboard artists on the show, we would have them try to draw out a scene based on a snippet of script that was never really in the show.
Yeah.
That was designed to show off the personalities of the characters. This idea of a scene where Stan's teaching a bear to drive
Yeah.
is something that we've had boarded out by almost every board artist who ever worked on the show to get a sense of how do they draw
Yeah.
how do they draw vehicles, how do they draw characters, how do they
Yeah.
draw a bear.
Yeah.
And then we were just, again, we were up against the gun. We needed something to put in here, and we're like, oh, let's just plop the writer's test
Yeah.
right in. But I'm so glad we did, because I always laugh at that scene.
And Matt Brawley was the board artist who did this, and he just like it was like, oh, this is the correct answer for how to board this scene.
Yes.
He crushed it. Like it's he boarded it so funny, and made all the jokes work.
Matt Brawley went on to create the upcoming Disney show Amphibia.
Yeah.
Great board artist, then became a director on season 2. Now he's
Yeah.
running a show.
And he was, and him and Alonzo in particular, really
Amazing team.
They were a great team, and they really had a good sense of the show. Like we would always run ideas by those guys and just be like, "Do you like this?"
Yeah.
And we could always trust them to have like good instincts and be like, "Well, it's a good idea, but that doesn't excite me as an audience member."
On your show, it's good to have people who are basically fans of the show working on the show, that you can run stuff by them. We would get kind of cloistered off in the writer's room, and then we'd kind of come talk to the artists and just give them a taste test. Does this feel like the show? These feel like the characters that you love? I gotta give Mike props. This is definitely the funniest of these 3 stories, and the funniest stuff comes from Mike. Like just the broad architecture of just how awful Stan is when he's honest, and what the tone of that is. That's all Mike.
Well, because I kind of have this philosophy that like lying is good often because you're trying to protect people's feelings. It's like Liar Liar basically.
It's 100% the plot from Liar Liar. But like in Liar Liar, he noticed that he was lying. We thought it would be funny if Stan somehow doesn't hear what he's saying, and so just it keeps digging in and making it worse and worse.
And probably my proudest moment on the show is the super dark thing that's coming up when Stan is just questioning life and how meaningless it is to the kids.
This t-shirt is my size. Never mind the t-shirt.
Whoa, you're an ugly man. we were just trying to show that lying can be important sometimes.
Yeah. And it was always important for us to have moments like Mabel saying "I'm so sorry" to the guy, just so the show
to soften it. If we have a character be really mean, we need another character to show like that's not the perspective of the series.
Yeah.
That's the perspective of the character.
Totally.
This is Mike's greatest scene. That's a caricature of me.
Yeah, that's also
So like I remember when I first saw this joke, I laughed really hard at it, and then like I started getting really picky about the phrasing of it. I'm like, this is a great joke. Oh, but are we just being cynical for cynical's sake? Is there a more artful way to describe this joke that will like, be more sophisticated? And this was like a big rift between me and Mike, because Mike's like,
we almost never fought.
Mike's like, Alex, this is the best joke I've ever written, and you better not cut it. And I never actually intended to cut it. I was like, is there a way to do it? I was worried that it would come off as... I was worried that people would notice that we were exhausted, insane, like a little mad at how hard this was and just venting.
Yeah,
and I was worried
yeah.
that would be too transparent.
Yeah.
And I was wrong.
Well, and
Because it's just a delight to see a show get that dark.
yeah. Well, especially a show that's like
Intentionally sweet and kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is all this true?
No, I have to give Mike credit for like pushing. Like pushing the jokes to be weirder.
Yeah, I was often trying to just. It was like I would both try to push the show to be more grounded and more insane at the same time, which I'm sure was frustrating for Alex.
And again, here we had the choice moment. Mabel has a choice. She can either lie, which is against her moral code, and let her uncle go to jail, or she can like that. She has to choose between: is it more important to tell the truth, or is it more important to help my uncle?
Yeah.
And she lies for the greater good. You know, like in these short stories, those moments become more clear. Like, wow, we're kind of building to the same kind of structure every time.
Yeah.
In a half hour, it's a little less obvious.
Yeah, and there's also a little more nuance in it too.
Yeah.
Typically.
Now, in other episodes, Mabel lies plenty. Normally, she does not have a hard time lying. You know, in order to create stories, you sometimes have to push a little bit to create that arc, you know?
Yeah. That was a Matt Brawley edition when he said no tax fraud.
I don't know if it had been previously canonical to us that Stan for sure wears dentures, but we like this idea. So from now on, Stan wears dentures.
Yeah.
I always imagine because he's not like so old that it's logical that he would necessarily have dentures. In my mind, he probably like eats a lot of toffee peanuts and doesn't brush his teeth.
Yeah.
Doesn't go to dentists because he considers them quacks.
Yeah.
Has probably blown out at least 6 of them with firecrackers. Like he just lives dumbly.
Yeah.
And that's why he has no teeth. This is a complete Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for an ending this lazy.
We tried to come up with a better one constantly for
And
like hours and hours
We
and
couldn't
hours.
think of a better ending.
Yeah.
So we just embraced the fact that this one's for funsies.
Yeah, exactly.
We did have this thought, like, what if they're in a parallel version of Gravity Falls now for the remainder of the series?
Yeah.
Like, is there a way to track that out? But ultimately, we couldn't think of anything
Yeah.
to do with it.
Maybe this is one story we should keep to ourselves.
Agreed.
We worked a lot on the timing of exactly how long we should wait before Stan falls into that hole.
And I like that it's just this for 30 seconds.
Just is a great drawing of Stan. Again,
Yeah.
Alonso Ramirez Ramos, like perfectly appealing, angry Stan.
Yeah.
Stan is not the easiest character to voice. There's a lot of yelling, and I'm always appreciative when there's a scene where Stan is saying
Silent.
nothing. Yeah, it doesn't. I get. It's not that it hurts my throat; it hurts my head because that voice is next to my ears. This is stupid.